Welcome back, everybody. We have been going through our study of Daniel. And interestingly, in our study of Daniel, we've seen Nebuchadnezzar rise to power, become this great emperor. He has ruled over the kingdom of Babylon. It's one of the greatest kingdoms that has ever existed. Now, we know there were kingdoms before him, like the Egyptian Empire. And of course, that covered a big part of the world, but not the whole world like Babylon had. So he had set up this kingdom. He was very prideful. He was ended up by God giving him visions, was able to know the future of what was going to happen for all of time until Jesus returned. He had that vision of a great statue made of different metals, but it ended up being toppled by this rock cut without hands, which then filled the whole earth as a mountain, because there is a kingdom coming from God that will fill this whole earth. And then he's like, you know what? I don't like the fact that my golden head of this palace, of this statue, is gonna end. Let's make a whole statue of gold. So he sets up the statue of gold. Daniel's companions refuse to bow down to it. He wants to throw them into the furnace of fire. He does, but then Jesus walks with them and preserves them, and they come back out unscathed. So then he realizes, wow, your God is an amazing God. He's able to save, but he still hasn't made him his God. And then in our last chapter, we hear how God then humbled him completely when he was full of pride. And he said, look at the great Babylon that I've built. God sent him a dream, a warning. And because he didn't heed the warning that he would be judged for 7 years, a year after that, he then became an animal, and for 7 years acted as if he was an animal, until he finally humbled himself and gave God the glory, specifically recognizing that God chooses who rules over this earth. He thinks it was his own power, his army, whatever it may be, but he said, no, God chooses who rules among men. And that's a great comfort to anyone that gets worked up over who's in charge of what country and what world leaders are up to. So we are now moving past Nebuchadnezzar. Now, he died about a year after this sickness, this God-induced sickness where he became an animal, and his grandson has now taken the throne. Now, you're going to notice in your Bibles, it says your father, Nebuchadnezzar. Whenever we talk about your father, it can be anyone in your lineage. It doesn't mean actually your dad, okay? So I can say, your father Abraham to Jews several thousand years later. It's still their father. So it's not meant a direct son, okay? So his grandson took the throne after his grandson's father, Nabonidus. He had went to fight this uprising by this new empire starting to take over. This combination of Medes and Persians under this king Cyrus. So he goes to fight him, and now, unfortunately for Nabonidus, he was defeated, and he may have been killed at this point. But this man, Belshazzar, he was in charge of the city of Babylon, most powerful city in the world. And you would think when he heard that his father was missing, what would he do? He would go look for him. He was the second in the empire, right? His dad was the first, and you would think he would try to find his dad. But he didn't really care. He didn't seem overly worried about the fact that his dad was now missing and possibly dead. And instead of looking for him to see if he's alive, he says, you know what? I'm going to throw a drunken party. That sounds like a good plan, right? And most scholars will tell you this is probably an X-rated party that he's having here, okay? So we'll read and we'll see where they get that idea. So, and the Bible doesn't mince words, right? It tells you what's happening. So it's not like the Bible's trying to cover or hide things. It's telling you things as they were. So starting in Daniel chapter 5, verse 1, it says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the thousands. So you have 1,000 of your invitees that come by. These 1,000 men show up, because the lords would all be men. And he now knows his father's gone. So he throws this big party and he gets drunk in front of them. He actually starts drinking before his lords and invites them all to drink. Again, 1,000 guests. Now, we don't know how involved Belshazzar was when Nebuchadnezzar was king. But Nebuchadnezzar was the leader of the empire. So no doubt everyone knew his legend, his stories, what he had done. But you would think whenever he saw how his how his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar was humbled by God, where he gave glory to the God of the Hebrews, where he had appointed one of these Hebrew people as second in the kingdom. You think he would say, maybe I should learn the lesson of my grandfather. But unfortunately, he doesn't even try to learn the lesson of his grandfather. So we get to verse 2. He said, Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. So you're beginning to get the idea what this party was all about. You don't get a bunch of drunken men in the room and then bring all of your private women into the room as well to have a cocktail party, right? They're probably up to something that's less than honorable, okay? So essentially, you're emptying out the harems of these men, and particularly that of the king, and bringing them into this room. And remember, his father's harem would have been included. So all these women, okay, that were there. So a lot of strange things, I'm sure, happening within this palace. So then we get to verse 3. And is this microphone too loud, by the way? Is it good? Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So we get to verse 3. It says, Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes, his wives, his concubines, drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. So isn't this interesting? This horrible king, he's so prideful. He's so, in spite of having this kingdom handed to him, in spite of the fact that he just lost his own father, in spite of the fact he saw his grandfather humbled, in spite of the fact that his armies had to be destroyed. If Nabonidus is gone, the armies are gone. What ought he to do? He should look for a true God and honor that true God. What does he do? He takes the one God that he knew his grandfather honored, and he says, I want to ridicule that God and pray to these other gods. I'll pray to every God while I'm mocking that specific God. Guys, this, as crazy as this sounds, when you look at all the religions of the world today that claim atheism, right? There are a lot of people who claim atheism, and there are other religions. What is the one faith, the one God that they constantly will mock, that they will use as a curse word all the time? When they're angry, what word did they spew? Jesus Christ. They don't talk about any of the gods of the other religions. Do you see how the same thing's happening here? He is trying to mock the one true God. He singles out the plates, the dishes, the cups that were taken from the temple at Jerusalem before the temple was destroyed. And he wants all of these guests who are involved in this sexual immorality, and he wants them to get drunk using these cups. And he wants to do it in honor of his false gods. Does that seem like a good idea? I don't think so, especially not after he knew what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, was it a random selection? He said, I just want to pick on that God. I don't think so. I think it was intentional, okay? Now, I believe that Daniel remained a prominent figure, although Belshazzar doesn't seem to be very aware of him, because again, Daniel was second in command, essentially, of over all of Babylon whenever Nebuchadnezzar was reigning. So for whatever reason, he chose this guy. I'm going to mock his God, okay? So I believe, and we're going to soon see, he made a major mistake. Because if he had done it to any other God, he would have been fine. But he did it to the true God, the living God. So verse 5, in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaister of the wall, or the plaster as we call it, of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. How many times in the Bible does God write with his own hand? Anyone have a guess?
Once.
Twice? Anyone else? Once? Okay. Anyone else? Tell me the two times you're thinking of.
Going on the tablet with Moses. and
Uh-huh.
Jesus and the same.
And what about right here?
10 commandments.
That'd be a third time. And what about after he broke the tablets and he had to rewrite them? God rewrote them, right? So,
He made Moses.
Yeah.
no, he didn't. I actually thought that too. God rewrote them. So Moses had to bring 2 new pieces of tablet and God wrote them again. So that's what I always thought too. That's what I always thought too. But it's 4 times, twice with the tablets, 1 with Jesus writing with his hand, and right here. Now, when God wrote the first time, and by the way, these are all Jesus Christ writing. When it was the first time, and he brought the commandments to the people, what was the result? What happened to the people whenever Moses came down that first time? They had made a golden calf, and of course he broke the tablets, and then 3,000 of them died that day because at Moses' command. What happens here? God writes with his hand, this whole city is going to be conquered and Belshazzar is going to die. And sorry, spoiler alert, Belshazzar is going to die. But then what happens whenever Jesus writes in the sand? They come to kill someone, right? Someone's going to die. Jesus writes in the sand. Again, we don't know exactly what he wrote. I believe he wrote the 10 Commandments, but can't prove that. But everyone who was going to condemn her, they all walked away. And I believe because they realized they're sinners too. Now, when Jesus said, neither do I condemn you, what was he saying? Did he say you don't have to follow God's law? No, if he wrote the law down, she's guilty. She is condemned. For him to say, neither do I condemn you, he's saying someone's going to take your punishment for you. You can walk free, but someone's got to die. So what was he saying? He's saying, I'm going to take that for you. And I think that's amazing, but we won't get too off topic. So here we have Belshazzar, and he begins to really start saying, whoa. Now, I love the language of the King James for this. The joints of his loins were loosed. What do you guys think that means?
Yeah.
That means my sphinctering. Okay. That means that he is now, let's say he's messed his pants. Okay. And I don't blame him. If I was sitting there having a party and then a massive disembodied hand started writing something on my palace wall, I might be a little anxious as well. But he all of a sudden loses interest in drinking, loses interest in mocking God. Okay. He is desperately afraid of what the handwriting could mean because it was clearly the hand of God. Okay. And by the way, you guys know the phrase, can you see the writings on the wall? You ever heard the writings on the wall? That means it's there and it's guaranteed. That's where it comes from. Whenever we say that, it comes from this chapter in the Bible. When you say, oh, the writing's on the wall, that means it's obvious. The answer is done. So now let's see what the king says. Verse 7 says, the king cried aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck and shall be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Again, he didn't know his dad was dead. He's like, you'll be the next after me. You'll be next in line to the throne if you just tell me what this says. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. So again, he wanted anyone and everyone who had the possibility of explaining, making sense of this crazy situation to come before him. Now, these were people from every kingdom. Remember, they had gathered people from every conquered kingdom and educated them in Babylon to have the wisdom of all nations, people who could speak every language. He's like, surely someone knows what this writing is. I cannot read it, right? And again, he had Jewish people there, and he wanted to know, can anyone tell me? But this was written in a language that no one could understand. All the nations of the world could not read this language. So Belshazzar, he is pretty worried because this is not some human trick. This isn't some magician's magic trick, right? So he knows outside of the walls of Babylon, there are armies of this Medo-Persian Empire, and his army's gone, so he doesn't know what to do. So how's he going to protect himself? He thought these walls could protect him. But if he thought walls could protect him, this supernatural hand had gotten inside the wall. He probably doesn't feel so safe anymore. Now, verse 10. Now, when it says the queen, some people think it's his wife. Some people think it's his mother, right? The one that would have maybe known Daniel personally, right? So it says in verse 10, now the queen, by reason of the word of the kings and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. Whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Forasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. And now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. I find this very, very interesting. Every possible riddle, every possible confusion, every possible discovery that needs made, Daniel knew. And on top of that, even though Nebuchadnezzar says his name is Belteshazzar, Daniel called himself Daniel. He took his name back. Even this queen, did you notice what she said? She explains him as Daniel. He says the king named him Belteshazzar, but we still call him Daniel. He refused to submit to Nebuchadnezzar. By the end of his life, he refused to be called by some name honoring the kings of the Babylon, or the gods of the Babylonians. He wanted to honor the true God. May we be so bold. Really, it's amazing, you know? So he has everything about him, excellent spirit. So Nebuchadnezzar's wife or daughter-in-law, whoever it was, she knew Daniel and she knew that he always told the truth, okay? Now, I suspect, I don't know, I suspect that not only Nebuchadnezzar will be in heaven, I believe maybe this queen may also be in heaven because she wasn't at the party. She came to let this guy know you can trust what Daniel says. If I go to someone and say, this person, you can believe everything they say, maybe I believe what they say too. So who knows whether this lady will be there? We don't know, right? So she heard the distress of her grandson. She comes by. She thought highly of Daniel. And she says, again, she calls him Daniel, which I think, again, is big because that defies Nebuchadnezzar's command. When Nebuchadnezzar made a law, everyone followed. She didn't care. She called him Daniel. I think, again, that says some things, but we'll know. What does Daniel mean again? Does anyone remember? God is El, that's right. And Dan, the tribe of Dan, was the judge, right? God is my judge. So when I say Daniel, I'm saying God will be the one who judges me. You can't judge me, right? So now Daniel's going to show up. Verse 13 says, Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. So Belshazzar, he doesn't really care how much it's going to cost him. He doesn't care who he has to kick out of their position to give Daniel the position. He needs to know what this is. He is willing to flatter Daniel. He's willing to make great promises of riches. He's willing to make him third in the kingdom over even his own children if he has them. I mean, that's, again, a huge reward that he's talking about. So all he has to do is read the writing on the wall. That's all he wants to know. Now, by the way, Daniel has already been worshipped by kings. Do you guys remember back in Daniel chapter 2, whenever he tells Nebuchadnezzar his dream and interprets it for him? Nebuchadnezzar bows before him. Means nothing to Daniel, right? It means nothing to him that Belshazzar is going to honor him. So we have another king ready to do the same. Now, most people would seize the opportunity. Do you have a question?
Like, he likes it. He knows how to sing.
Mhm.
So after he died, like what really happens to Daniel between that and the time he?
Think of it similar to when a president in the United States, right, elevates all these people to his cabinet, to high positions of authority, to heads of different departments. And then the next president comes and brings up his own people. The people who were in the previous cabinet, they don't like disappear, but they don't hold the same high position and authority. They're still government officials, but they're not like these major issues. So it'd be like today, knowing what, I don't know, Biden's Secretary of Defense, he didn't disappear. He's just not there anymore. He's not in the main scene. But if it turned out he was a great Secretary of Defense and Trump said I needed his advice, he would come back and, and help Trump. Similar to something like that, with a little less, obviously, a little different under monarchies. But does that make sense? Okay, so Daniel's still around. He still has respect. He's still the leader of the magicians. And again, not magicians, again, not David Blaine, but just people who practice, the hidden arts. And by the way, this is going a little off topic, but there is a thinking, and I do agree with this, that whenever we hear about the wise men from the East who are waiting for the Messiah, they believe they are descendants of the people who trained under Daniel. And they believe that Daniel shared with them the prophecies of the Bible and told them what to look for, because later in the book of Daniel, it says the exact day that Jesus will come riding into Jerusalem on his donkey. God reveals that to him. So if indeed he passed that information on to people in Babylon, these Eastern people would be waiting for the Messiah, and they would know sometime in the lifetime of this event, this guy's going to be born. And then based on some of the Old Testament scriptures, they're looking for signs of his coming. So that's what leads them to travel from this area of the world. Not proven, just speculated, okay? Anyway, so a lot of, and by the way, what Daniel does here, it is something that many Christian leaders, and I'm not questioning their faith, would have trouble with. To be faithful to God in the face of bribery or flattery, or not to at least become prideful when great kings bow before you, is a very difficult thing. Humility is something that is the greatest challenge for many preachers and teachers and Bible leaders and all these other folks. Some of you got to stay humble. And even Paul understood that God kept him humble so that he wouldn't become too prideful, right? So that's something that Daniel, again, he is a role model in many ways. So how does he respond to this great flattery? Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give the rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. You can keep your gifts. I don't want them. I don't care for what you can offer me." He's not interested in what this man has to offer, okay? He only wants to do the will of God. That is a role model. Who cares what people can give you? It doesn't matter. Do what God has asked you. So, again, it would seem, I believe, based on the conversation he has now, that he is actually quite irritated with Belshazzar. Possibly because he was there when he was raised. I don't know. But he's irritated that he would not learn the lessons that God spent Nebuchadnezzar's lifetime teaching him. He's like, you're going to throw this all away when you saw what happened to your grandfather? Because again, the pride is the only thing that this guy got from Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't get any of the other lessons of humility. So let's see verse 18 through 21. It says, "O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor." You hear that first phrase, by the way? He's like, the only reason any of this is here is because the only true God gave it to you. He's the one who gave Nebuchadnezzar any of this. Stop fooling yourself and thinking you've earned it or deserve it. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. Belshazzar had to know the story of his grandfather. There's no doubt in my mind. The greatest king of Babylon had become an animal for 7 years. That's not something you easily hide, okay? Everyone knew the story. He even wrote a decree and sent it to every corner of his kingdom for people to know what happened to him. So this was major news. Belshazzar was simply ignoring it. He told everyone that they need to worship the God of heaven. So if Belshazzar, if he was a wise king, he would have studied the kings before him. He would have seen what happened to his grandfather. But God reminds him through Daniel that if you want to be blessed by God, you have to humble yourself before God. So Belshazzar, had he humbled himself? No, he had lifted himself up before God. He said, I'm greater than the God of the Hebrews. I will desecrate the plates and bowls and everything that came out of the temple. So Daniel pulls out, you know what Nebuchadnezzar went through. And then he goes on to verse 22. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords and thy wives and thy concubines, and drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, in whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. What a foolish man Belshazzar was. He knew the truth of God. This wasn't some mystery revealed to him, and he chose to serve himself instead. So Belshazzar put himself in this situation. In verse 20, now again, it may be because his grandfather was humbled by God. It may be that he was doing this as revenge to God. It may be that his friends were all like, oh, we know what happened to your grandpa. We know how the God of the Hebrews did this. And Belshazzar, out of spite, may have said, oh, well, let's bring his stuff. We'll show him, and try to do all of this to try to challenge God. We don't know that. Again, that's speculation, but that certainly would make sense because Daniel is calling him out. You knew this. This isn't a mystery, and you refuse to submit. So now we go and read what it says. Verse 24, then was the part of the hand sent from him, sent from God, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. So these are terms of money, okay? You have a mina or a mene, a mina, which is a large unit of currency, okay? Think of it like a $100 bill, for example, okay? So I said, hey, mene, mene, $100 bill, $100 bill. And then you have the tekel, which is a smaller unit, like a dollar, okay? So you have $100 bill, $100 bill, dollar, and then you have the upharsin, which is a fraction of a dollar. So let's just say a 50-cent piece would be the best way to look at it, okay? So it's $100 bill, $100 bill, dollar bill, 50-cent piece. Now you all understand what God was trying to say, right? Okay. So he says, this is the interpretation of the thing, okay? So he's actually now going to explain to the king, this is what it means. Verse 26 says, Mene, I've looked at the whole thing. I've looked at your entire bank account, okay? I've seen your entire kingdom. He says, God has numbered the kingdom and finished it. God saw the beginning and the end of your kingdom. So it'd be like somebody saying, hey, I have seen all of your assets, all of your retirement, all your bank accounts, and guess what? It's not enough. It's gone. You don't have anything left. So he's saying, I've looked at your whole thing and I have measured it and it's over. Your kingdom is done. And he says the word twice. And the reason we find out he says it twice, because it's sure. There is no way out of this. And then he says, tekel, single dollar. I've looked at your kingdom and you aren't enough to sustain it. You are insufficient. Your $1 for this kingdom, it is not worth you and you're not worth it. So he says, thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. You refuse to humble yourself. You do not deserve this kingdom. And God chooses who rules the kingdom. So then he comes up with the final word, Perez, which is just simply saying the upharsin, it's the plural, right? So Perez, that fraction of a dollar, your kingdom, just like a dollar is split, your kingdom is going to be split between two kingdoms. The kingdom is divided and is given to the Medes and the Persians, just like a divided shekel. Now, imagine God is telling you, your days are up. Your kingdom is over and you are going to die because you're unworthy. So that's, again, we talked about the writing on the wall. If you were Belshazzar and you think back to what happened to Grandpa, where Grandpa's an animal for 7 years, right? How did Grandpa stop being an animal for 7 years? Humbled himself, right? What would be the right response of Belshazzar to this news? Anyway, huh?
He did, he should bring it.
Yes, he should become humble, right? He should humble himself in the sight of God. He should fall to his knees, beg the mercy of God, ask his forgiveness. There are many people in the Bible who God has sentenced to death. And so some of them will humble themselves and will say, ask for mercy from God. You know what God does in those situations? Many times he gives them mercy. I'm going to add some years to your life. Saul's going to come kill you if you stay here. No, I didn't say if you stay here. Saul's going to come kill you and they're going to hand you over. So David leaves and Saul gives him more, or God gives him more years. The point is, that's what should have happened. So how instead did Belshazzar respond? Verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. So all of this, and Belshazzar sticks with his original plan. I'm going to make you king. Now you're going to be great in my kingdom. Again, he couldn't see the writing on the wall.
Makes him not be able to see
The writing on the wall?
Yeah,
So if instead, let's just say it said this, then commanded Belshazzar that they bring a sacrifice, and he knelt before Daniel saying, please tell me what to do, right? Give me direction, give me guidance. That would show a change of heart, a change of plan. His original plan was always, somebody read this to me, and I'm going to elevate you to the top, all right? You're going to be under me. So what'd you do? They read it to him, okay, I'm going to elevate. He didn't even care about the message. He heard the message, but it didn't change a thing in his life. He continued on as if he never did a thing, right? So he made proclamations.
Can I try this?
What's that?
Can I try this?
Yeah, go ahead.
We can put today, someone can prophesy for individual. But because we have chosen so the prophets today, in our mindset, we reject what God may have given somebody to say for individual. You don't have to be a prophet to prophesy. You know, when God can give a person a word for another person.
Yeah, God can speak to you through others for sure.
But what the surface of it,
Mhm.
the real surface of it, you know, what if someone was to speak to one of our leaders in the country? A God-given word. Or if someone was to speak to the leader of Islam or Israel, and they take it like, you know.
Yeah.
It's that same content on.
Yeah, so, and think about it like this. Imagine if I told you, I'll add one other thing to that. Imagine if I told you, hey, you're gonna die tonight. And then you said, oh, thanks for letting me know. I'm making you dinner tomorrow. If you said, thanks for letting me know, I'm making you dinner tomorrow. You see the problem there, right? So he's sitting there, he says, the kingdom's over. It's over. You've been weighed, you've been measured, it's gone. He's like, great, you can be next in line in my kingdom. Well, no, you don't have a kingdom. It's gone. And he's just refusing to hear what's right in front of him, right? So the proclamation meant nothing. His proclamation meant nothing. It's God's proclamation that means everything. So verse 30 says, in that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. So God weighed and measured the rulers of the world. He determines who sits on the throne. He determines who has authority. And he sees the heart of people. And he humbles those that need humbled. Again, he humbled Nebuchadnezzar. He tried to humble Belshazzar. Belshazzar refused. So Nebuchadnezzar is humbled. And again, I think he'll be in heaven. We'll see. But ultimately, Belshazzar, he refused to humble himself. He lifted himself in pride. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the imagery we see here, but what do we see for the Antichrist? The Antichrist, he is a man of sin, right? He rises to authority after the rapture in the tribulation. And remember, in this situation, Belshazzar, all these armies are surrounding him. When you read the book of Revelation, you're going to see seals open, trumpets blown, bowls poured out, the whole world turning against the Antichrist and those that follow him. And he refused to humble himself. He refuses to turn to God. He stands firm against God. And here we see that the enemy of Belshazzar, they are going to conquer Babylon without lifting a sword, right? How is Jesus going to destroy the Antichrist? The words of his mouth. So there actually is a picture here. But anyway, we go on, and we'll finish the chapter, then have a few more comments. It says verse 31, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. That's 62 years old. So Darius the Median. So Cyrus the Great. Okay, I just said Darius, but now I'm saying Cyrus, and I'll explain that. So Cyrus the Great is seen by history as a prototype of a great leader. He's considered the best of the best leader. Why? Because he's extremely brave, he's extremely efficient, but he's also very tolerant. He's a very high quality leader. In 1971, the Iranians, which do you guys know what the name of Iran was before it was Iran? Persia, right? It was the Medo-Persian Empire, which again still exists till today. It celebrated his anniversary of 2,500 years of when he started the Persian Empire, right? Now, his father was a Persian and the king of Elam, and his mother was the daughter of the king of the Medes. So he was the child that was born of the uniting of these two kingdoms, okay? So he ended up actually attacking his father-in-law later and captured that city without a battle. So he actually defeated the Medes as well. And he uses clever tactics every time he can. These are just some history things which become more relevant later in the book of Daniel. So on October 12th, 539 BC, he captured Babylon. And again, he did it without a battle. So how does he capture Babylon? Does anyone know the story? Supposedly? What'd you say? Go ahead.
They had certain rivers.
Yeah, they would divert the water. They'd drop the river levels down. They would sneak in without having to breach the walls at all. So again, now, whenever Cyrus took over Babylon, he makes it a second capital of the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, we remember one of the Persian kings named Ahasuerus. Do you know what story that comes from? Esther, that's exactly right. So Alexander, again, whenever Alexander the Great conquers the Persians, he also makes Babylon one of his capitals. So when Cyrus enters Babylon, Daniel reportedly, according to Josephus, Daniel goes out to greet him. Daniel shows up and again, according to Josephus, brings him a 150-year-old scroll from the prophet Isaiah. And what the prophet Isaiah said in Isaiah 44, verse 27 to 28, he says, that saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers. So he said that someone is going to remove a river That saith of Cyrus. It's going to be a guy named Cyrus who drops the level of the rivers. This is 150 years before the birth of Cyrus. Cyrus is going to drop the rivers. He is my shepherd. He shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. So before Cyrus even said to Nehemiah and to Ezra, you guys can rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, he said Cyrus is going to drop rivers, is going to conquer. He's my servant, and he's going to tell Jerusalem to be rebuilt. Right? Cyrus is, again, according to Josephus, so impressed that he was mentioned by name in this prophecy that he then releases the Jews and contributes personally to the rebuilding of the temple, knowing that he's fulfilling prophecy, choosing to fulfill prophecy. So what probably convinced him, I think, more than anything else, I think Mindy's favorite verse from this chapter about the joints of his loins being loosed. Okay? And why do I say that? Well, Isaiah, again, in the same prophecy, in Isaiah 45 now, verse 1, it says, thus saith the Lord to his anointed, O Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. So I'm giving him the kingdom. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates will not be shut. I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect's, I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. I am the Lord, there is none else, there is no God beside me. I girded thee, and thou hast not known me. Cyrus is getting passages written about him and to him, a letter written to him through Isaiah from 150 years before he's born. Go ahead, Becky, what do you have?
Maybe it's the opposite of when the Bible talks about burden relief.
I would say so. I think when you gird your loins, you man up, right? You tighten up, you strengthen up. In this case, when you're scared, you know, people, they wet themselves or other things, mess themselves if they're scared, for sure. So Cyrus, he actually frees the captives. Again, this is just the context of it. And he returns the vessels that were defiled and taken from the temple and gave the Jews an incentive to go home. So in 2 Chronicles 36, it says in verse 22, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, as soon as he conquered it, in the first year that the word of the Lord was spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven. He is proclaiming that he understands it is the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, that he's the one who gave him all the kingdoms. The Lord God of heaven has given me and has charged me to build a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord God be with him, and let him go up. Ezra also verifies this in Ezra chapter 1. Good.
Last verse.
That was in 2 Chronicles 36 down through verse 23. And then Ezra chapter 1 verse 1 says, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, that the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. He made a proclamation throughout his kingdom and also put it in writing. Again, same thing from 2 Chronicles, where he says, the Lord has given me all kingdoms of the earth, has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem. Who is there among you of his people? If his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is the God, is what he actually writes in there. Again, Cyrus was a monotheist by the end of this, which is in Jerusalem, and whosoever remaineth, any place where he sojourneth, so anyone who's waiting around to the Jews, let the men of his place help him with silver and with gold and with goods and with beasts, besides the free will offering for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. He commanded his own subjects to donate to the rebuilding of the temple. I mean, this is pretty incredible. This is a world empire, and they're taking interest in this small city-state, which was actually a country of Israel, but specifically the city of Jerusalem. Now, historically, again, we're leaving the Bible a little bit, but they found a cylinder, okay, they would write their stories on cylinders, of Cyrus, which is found in the British Museum in London today. It's called the Stele, I think they call it Steles of Cyrus. So this is the line that is written on there. Without any battle, he entered the town, sparing any calamity. I returned to sacred cities on the other sides of the Tigris, the sanctuaries which have been ruins for a long time, and established them for permanent sanctuaries. I also gathered all the former inhabitants and returned them to their habitations. So he claims that he took over cities without burning a single building down, and he took the captives and released them back to their homes. Again, confirming what the Bible tells us to be history already. Cyrus, he actually claims to be king of Babylon, but he was also the king of Medo-Persia. He's the Persian Empire, right? He's the king of the Persian Empire. And he reigned, again, here it talks about a man named Darius. And Darius, are you confused by the names? I'm going to get to it right now. That's actually what I'm getting to. So
About the names.
I'm gonna explain it to you right here. So essentially, this King Darius is king over Babylon. Okay. Some people say, oh, well, maybe they're two different kings, and one of them was left in power of Babylon, and the other one left. Maybe Darius was king, and then Cyrus was king. But the truth of the matter is, Darius is not a name; it's a title. Okay. So if I went to Egypt and I said the Pharaoh is on the throne, the guy's name isn't Pharaoh. He might be Pharaoh Necho, right? Or Pharaoh Ramses, but his name isn't Pharaoh. Does that make sense? So whenever you use the name Darius, it's like saying Caesar to a Roman, right? It's like saying Abimelech to one of the Canaanites. That just means my father's the king. I'm the prince. I'm the next king. It's not an actual name. So the Darius that we're talking about, his name is Darius Gabaru. He was born in 601 BC, and he was 62 years old when he invaded Babylon, which is again what the Bible tells us. So in the British Museum, you can read the following from something called the Nabonidus Chronicle. So it says, in the month of Tashritu, at the time when Cyrus battled the forces of Akkad and Opis in the Tigris River, the citizens of Akkad revolted against him, but Nabonidus scattered his opposition with a great slaughter. On the 14th day, Sapar was taken without a fight, and Nabonidus fled for his life. On the 16th day, Gubaru, named Darius the Mede, okay, the leader of Gataim, don't have to worry about the names, along with the army of Cyrus, entered Babylon without any opposition. They arrested Nabonidus when he returned to Babylon. On the 3rd day of the month, Cyrus marched into Babylon. They laid down green branches in front of him. The city was no longer at war. Peace was restored. Cyrus then sent his best wishes to the residents living there, and his governor, Darius Gubaru, then installed leaders to govern over all of Babylon. So what this means, that no matter who was king over Babylon, they were called the Darius. So whoever's ruling, when Cyrus was there, he was the Darius of Babylon. When he left another Darius to rule over Babylon. Does that make sense? So hopefully that clears up that confusion there. Okay.
The place.
Say that one more time. Melissa, were you saying something?
You're talking.
I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Oh, no problem.
It's not Fox.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll stop there. That takes us to Daniel chapter 6. And that's the end of the Babylonian Empire. This is where it's finished. Next time we read, we'll be reading about the Persian Empire, where Daniel still existed, still ruled. Anyone have final thoughts or questions?
So Cyrus ended up finding Daniel and keeping Daniel in power.
So we're going to read that next week. But yes, Daniel shows up, and apparently, again, according to Josephus, he goes and introduces Cyrus to and remember, Daniel had traveled around the world.
Yeah,
Daniel had worked for the king of Babylon. He was probably well known, kind of like where you see today Marco Rubio being Secretary of State. World leaders all know him. So that would be similar to where Daniel was at that time. He would be traveling to all these areas and negotiating with these other cities. So yes, we're going to see Cyrus or Daniel has high standing with them. Anything else?
I want to know how old Daniel is at this point.
How old is Daniel?
Yeah. at
So
this
he
point.
is 70, see, it's 70 years after his captivity, and it would seem that he was about 12 years old whenever he went. So guesstimates around 80, 85 years old, somewhere in that range. Did you have something, Linda, you were saying? Oh, okay, gotcha. Russ, you had something?
Using Darius is like using president.
Yeah, exactly. So the president's not the name, it's just a title. What'd you say, Beth?
Played like Cyrus the Trump.
People do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
They were calling him like Cyrus or the second Cyrus.
I have not heard that, but I will look into it.
Look it up.
I will. Any other questions, anybody from online or anything? All right, well, I'm gonna stop recording here.